This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Welcome back to the conclusion of my talk with ChangeMaker Barbara Fields, the Vice President of Housing and Asset Building at Abt Associates. We've been talking about her path to working in affordable housing, including her time as President Obama's regional administrator for 6 New England HUD field offices. Now, Barbara, Abt is a research firm as well, and one of your recent studies looked into how effective the Los Angeles region's housing authorities were in using their vouchers to help people leave homelessness. Can you tell us more about what was found there?
Yeah, that's a study that just came out. Thanks for bringing it up. And one of our real areas of strength is working on homelessness, everything from, we are the long-term partner of HUD, that we produce the annual homelessness assessment report that goes to Congress every year. We are the first to do a study on homeless encampments and what's happening there. And we're going to be working with the foundation to look at their grant making in that area, what's working. And that recent study looking at vouchers was that when people are given the vouchers and assistance in housing location, that they really can begin to find housing that becomes their permanent home going forward. There was some question about some of these vouchers and were they getting out, but our recent assessment showed in Los Angeles that in many of the communities across the entire Los Angeles County region, that there was demonstrable impact showing that people have been able to find and locate and maintain housing for themselves. So, we'll continue to do this work. We are looking, besides Los Angeles, we're doing work with HUD on that was a shorter term. We're also doing a long-term study called Family Options. And we look at families who 12 years ago were in shelters, and what happened when they had vouchers and supportive housing and went to different places. What's been the impact? Looking back, right? So it's one thing when we place people in the homes, but we want to really go back and see were they able to maintain their homes, how it impacted their lives, right? So there's both the short-term study and the long-term. And I think it's important to do both. What's the effect of those supports to families, having the voucher, having supportive services? What does it do for children living in the homes, right? Their educational outcomes.
Yeah, it's crucial to do both, because I think at that point you can really talk about not just the housing voucher or whatever the housing tool is, tax credit, whatever the mechanism, but you could say, okay, it was not just a stabilizer for a point in time, but look, over a decade, these are the other success metrics that were achieved. And then you can quantify those in your research, whether it is college degrees of the children because they were in stable neighborhood schools, et cetera, employment standards, or, there's a whole host of metrics that you guys can go through for your research. But then you're right, looking back, it says, okay, how did their trajectory as an individual, as a family, as single mother, whatever you want to describe the individual as being in a category, then you can really chart that out and say, look how this worked. As practitioners, we know that and we see that, but to be able to have a research group like yours actually go out and quantify this and help describe what's happening as it relates to the stabilization that these vouchers provided. That's crucial. That is like the rest of the story that we all need to hear.
Well, you're talking about one of my passions. As I said earlier, that I didn't want to get into housing when I first started my career.
Yeah, right. Famous last words, right?
And I used to stand up at all these press conferences and say, I don't care about housing. And they're like, wait a second. She's at HUD. She's at Rhode Island Housing. And I would pause and say, if that's all we do. But I believe passionately that it all begins at home. It all begins in a safe, quality, affordable, secure place to put your head at night so that children can go wake up, get a good night's sleep, and go to school. So parents can go to work or get job training, or seniors can go somewhere and have some activities so that we can have access to fresh food, to get health care, to have arts and recreation in our community. But it begins at home. It doesn't end there, but it certainly begins there. And to have the studies that show what some of the impact is of the voucher and helping a family to feel safe and secure in their home. But then to look at it, as you said, over the years, a longitudinal study, we need both. It's not an either or. In my world, it's an and both. And I'm excited about this recent study because it will look back over 12 years. And that's a good chunk of time in anyone's life, and to see what the impact has been. But I am really passionate about the connectedness of these issues, health outcomes. You can't go to the doctor and get treated and then go back and live on the street, unsheltered. That isn't really going to work. Or, to think about our children, they have to come home a place maybe to do their homework. But, home is also a place for family celebrations, family traditions. And, most of America is housed, but we have to think about those people that are not housed, that are poorly housed, that are doubling up. And the numbers are out there. And, people paying too much, the anxiety that families experience over not being able to meet the rent or a mortgage, and the impact that has on the family as well. So I really do believe that it starts at home, and that's why I got more and more excited about the work that I do, and being in a mission-driven organization like Abt is helping me to further that.
Well, individuals and families and children cannot thrive if their sole focus is on just surviving. And that's what so many people are doing. We talk about whether it is paycheck to paycheck, but it is really even more basic than that. It is trying to survive the day. And when you're living in a tent city, or et cetera, you can list all of the ails, but when you're able to have a voucher and pick and choose where you live and what neighborhood and what school, and you have mobility related to that voucher, that puts a lot of decision making in the hands of an individual that can set them up for success. And I think that's the difference here that we're talking about, the thriving versus surviving equation.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of other things that we're doing at Abt along those lines. I mean, we have been working in one state in New England where they're trying to expand opportunities for our Black and brown families to have home ownership opportunities. So we're looking at some of the data underlying the current situation and where they want to go and who they can impact and what are the choices that people have or don't have, given some of the historical laws in place that have segregated our communities or denied opportunities for people. So we are centering equity in all of our work, whether it's the voucher work or the homeless encampments or the home ownership work, looking at all that. But we're also very interested in asset building, the other part of our work. And one of the emerging issues for us is looking at guaranteed income programs. And we are excited to be partnering with Mayors for Guaranteed Income and looking at these programs in several cities across the country. That is still a new area of research, but we're very excited about that because it's providing resources to families so they can make the choices that they need to help their families move forward.
So what exactly do you mean when you describe a program like that?
So guaranteed income is the idea that someone is given a amount of money on a monthly basis over a period of time, and it is unencumbered, so the family receiving it can make the choices they need to make for their families. Most of these communities are choosing different populations to target. Some are looking at perhaps single mothers, looking at youth. Every community is choosing different areas, but we get in there early in the program to be able to do that assessment over time and to see what the impact is. So this is money that families receive in addition to other services and supports they may be receiving. I think Mayors for Guaranteed Income now have about 70 or 80 mayors or more around the country. We're working in 8 of those communities and looking, beginning now. We're still early in that, but the initial findings from other communities, this was started by the mayor in Stockton, California. The initial findings have been very positive, that often a family, when given those supports for anywhere from 1 to 2 years, they really can begin to stabilize their family situation and create a better and more secure economic future for themselves and their family.
You work with a lot of cities and states, and based upon some of your experience, is there any others that you want to highlight that are doing this affordable housing delivery platform, that they're doing it very, very well for whatever reason or program? Anything specific you want to highlight for us?
You really want to put me on the spot there, huh?
Do you have a favorite child?
Okay. And I have looked at things all around the country. As I said, I happen to live in Rhode Island, so I'm going to do a little plug for the smallest state in the country and for a particular neighborhood called Olneyville, where I spent a good part of my 20 years at LISC in that neighborhood, where they are building affordable rental housing. They're building home ownership, some net zero homes. They are working with the local public housing authority, but really exciting. They've done this in collaboration with all the groups in the neighborhood. They have reclaimed a park, started outdoor activities in that park. They've worked with the local Boys and Girls Club to have after-school activities. They've worked with the local theater group, and they've worked with the local community police in really productive partnerships that I would not have thought possible. So it's really been a comprehensive approach to neighborhood and community revitalization. And actually, that neighborhood was highlighted as one of 3 in a Department of Justice study called Building Your Way Out of Crime. That was work that was done, maybe it was documented over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but I'm proud to say that work continues. I was just out there recently to see these net zero homes that were amazing, selling to first-time home buyers, really at very reasonable rates in today's housing market, and surrounded by, revitalized park, rental opportunities, senior housing. We're also, at Abt, I was, as an aside, doing a lot on the senior housing side. So for me, that really exemplifies the best of what we can do when we invest in a targeted way, creating jobs, putting abandoned properties back on the tax roll, decreasing the amount of calls for assistance to the police, having opportunities for children to have after-school activities that are healthy for them and healthy for the community. In that neighborhood, I would say this was all hands on deck. It really was a partnership among many and setting priorities. And I always say, you and I, Katie, we could sit down and go, well, in our neighborhood, these are the things we need, and we can make a very long list. But it's a different thing to do that and then say, okay, what are we going to prioritize? What's going to be our top 10? Because we can't do them all. And when I go back and see that they did their top 10, which allowed them then to work on to the next 10, that to me is very, very satisfying to know that I played a very small part in that effort starting back in the early 2000s. It's kind of exciting. I think there's more work to be done. They have some new leadership. That's also important. I think our housing situation was not created overnight and will not be solved overnight, but we need to take the steps. And when you see a change in leadership, both in the private developer or nonprofit or community leaders or the mayor or the governor, and you see the work continue, then you know it's deeply rooted. It can continue and not change with those changes in leadership and working at the, I always call it the grassroots and the grass tops. They all have to be engaged. It is about engaging people at the community level, people with the lived experience, people day to day, and those who actually control a lot of the purse strings, and being together in partnership and sharing the decision making is what it was about and moving forward. I could talk about Olneyville quite a bit, but I think it also, we had, people working on health. There's a neighborhood clinic there. There's a neighborhood community health center. There's a free clinic and a health center. And I love the fact that there was home ownership opportunities and rental opportunities. We worked with the local school, got them very engaged in the community. We had a great principal there. It was an elementary school. That was so exciting to see those types of partnerships. We started with a lot of hope, but to see it, when I go back now and I'm not involved, and to see it continuing is, it gives me that kind of vision and hope that we can keep trying this in other places. So just a little plug for my hometown.
What you've described is the true success platform because it's hitting on every single one of those indicators that really define a community, and it transcends all political changes or leadership changes because it's really going for the end product to say this is a neighborhood. This is built on community. And yes, it checks the boxes of curbs and streets and schools and health clinics, but it's creating something stronger, and it is standing the test of time, like you said, and it's getting to be stronger and stronger as a community. And if we can just recreate those to the best of our abilities as practitioners here, or renovate those, then one neighborhood at a time.
Yeah, and what was exciting for me when I came to Abt is, I came for the housing work and the asset building, the guaranteed income, the family self-sufficiency program, which is run by HUD, and we do a bunch of work looking at the vouchers and homelessness, all of those. But Abt has strength in the health area, in the child welfare area, in labor markets, in environment, and we can reach across and build those teams that communities need depending on their individual needs. And that cross-cutting approach to whether we're looking at health issues or housing issues or environment issues. And then we have these tools on the data collection and the analysis to pull that together. That to me really is what drew me in here, and I'm seeing it at play in a number of our recent projects. We also do work with the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection, and we look at families' financial wherewithal and their ability to maintain their economic security. So it's not even a housing issue, but it affects the people living in the house, right? As you were saying,
Right.
All those pieces fit together. So we think of sort of our group as housing and asset building and community, but we also know that we're looking broader. We're doing work for a couple of national companies and foundations looking at, neighborhood work and, what works at the neighborhood level and what it takes to advance those efforts. And then we can pull on all these different areas of expertise. I am daily impressed with the people at Abt and their level of expertise and their skills on the quantitative side, on the qualitative side, and thrilled to be part of the work that we're doing.
You may have just answered my last question here, but what do you see on the horizon for Abt and then, the near? You guys have been around doing really good work for years and years. What do you see on the horizon for the next few years for Abt?
I think that as we see this hopefully continued focus on housing supply and housing demand, sort of how are we really going to grapple with homeless issues, people experiencing homelessness? What can we really do to move towards ending homelessness? What can we do to increase the supply of housing, both homeownership opportunities? How do we address some of the long-term systemic inequitable fissures in our society, in our community? I think we're working on all those things. Again, the asset building part of our work is very exciting to me. I think that's a second area. And third, how do we connect housing and health? How do we really look at these issues together, as you said, sort of maybe bridging some silos? So again, looking at, equity, health, and climate would be sort of the areas for housing that I see us really beginning to do more on. And what does that mean? What are the strategies? Have we tried a strategy? Is it working? Great. If we're trying a strategy, does it need to be tweaked? Mid-course corrections. Or are we trying a strategy that's not working? And we have to say, we tried it and it doesn't work. So we need to look at something else. And we are here to work with our partners. As I said, we're working with the federal government, with HUD on their programs. We're working with foundations on their own grant making, which I really appreciate because we all get excited at the beginning, but we have to also see, is it working? Is it doing what we intended it to do, that we set out to do? And I think that's where Abt comes in and can work with partners. And then finally, I say our TA, our technical assistance work has been fabulous. And I think we have an opportunity to do this, to do more of it. We have worked in partnership with the Furman Center at NYU. There is a publicly available website called localhousingsolutions.org, which provides online services around best practices. But we can also go in because, as I said, people can see that, but then we can help to implement that as people look at those solutions. And I think more and more work's being done at the state and local level, and we will work on that. And finally, you and I didn't talk about, you mentioned at the very beginning, the low-income housing tax credit. That is the number one financial vehicle for getting more housing built in America. And we would love to see what we can do to help improve, expand, and see greater opportunities to use that vehicle.
Yeah, wouldn't it be a great day if there wasn't just this once in a million lottery chance of getting a 9% credit, but there were. That was like the standard. Could you even imagine?
Well, when I was running Rhode Island Housing, the state finance agency, we did not have, we were not tapped out on our 4% credits. And you have now, how many states are tapped out? I think at the time there were like 4, 5, 6 ones. And I'd go to these national meetings and go, well, we're not. And now, of course, many more are tapped out on the 4%, and the changes that could be made on the use of bond financing what was in Build Back Better would have doubled the usage. And then on the 9%, I want to know a state where you don't have to go in, you can only go in once and get approved, right? You have to go back in the second round and the third because they have limited number. And we just completed a study on what states are doing around the gaps in construction costs. We partner a lot with the National Council of State Housing Agencies. That's the trade association for the housing finance agencies. And, 20-30% of construction cost increases since before the pandemic. What are we going to do? There was some great action by Treasury last week, terrific, so that some of the state and local funds that were put out in the last 2 years can be used. There were some challenges with that, but we don't want to lose those projects that are ready to put that shovel in the ground, right? They got that far.
Yep. And then that additional flexibility will help even push them along. But, you think about all of this effort for fighting for 4%, 9%, whatever the pieces are, but it is the demand and to bridge some of those gaps, if we could just get over those hurdles to make these the norm, make these programs the norm, make them more accessible, available to wider groups and developers and so forth. Well, I have been talking with ChangeMaker Barbara Fields, the Vice President of Housing and Asset Building at Abt Associates. And Barbara, you have been a wealth of information as we have covered a wide variety of things. You guys are doing great work at Abt, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me on here. I've listened to several of your podcasts in the past. They're always interesting discussions, and I hope we've reached that mark today.
Yes, we definitely have, and we look forward to more research and more studies showing the success of affordable housing.
Thank you so much. I agree with that, for sure.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.